I am going to share with you something that has split churches. It's where a preacher stands on this particular aspect. It can chase people out the door. As a matter of fact, one little girl in Montana who was a big fan of mine. Little girls tend to be fans. I don't know why. But anyway, she was a big fan. She was sorely disappointed when she found this out about me. Star Trek, Star Wars. I'm Star Trek. I'm sorry, I grew up with Star Trek. And so much so I can recite lines. I can do the Vulcan sign easily. How many of you can do that? Just so sort of, yes, see? And it's not nanu, by the way. But one particular episode of the original Star Trek series was they arrive at this planet and discover that the planet had been tainted by a previous ship that had visited 100 years earlier. They had accidentally left behind a book. And this society had patterned themselves after the book. And the book was about the 1930s Chicago mob. And so, everybody's running around with Tommy guns, and they're all, it was a cute show, episode. And they did just a great job of just showing how this one book had influenced the society, and it was funny. Spock starts to try and act like a 1930s gangster, and of course is typically Spock. So with that in mind, imagine God leaving a, not primitive society, but imagine God leaves an instruction book behind, and everybody gets it wrong. So then what do you have to do? You have to step in, maybe better than Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy, and you have to teach them how the book works. And that was Jesus' predicament on earth. So here he is, but by the time he arrives, they had totally messed up the Old Testament. They got almost everything wrong. They were backwards, and they had created their own little society, much like this 1930s world that is patterning themselves after the Chicago mob. That's what Jesus meant. So here you are, you're trying to convince people to, how to interpret the Old Testament, to understand what is coming. And so Jesus teaches us these principles of the kingdom. And he uses parables. So, next screen. By the way, we have a new computer program which should make all of this so much easier. It's we've got some. Well, by the way, anybody else hear anything new this week or in the last couple of weeks? I've been talking about it.
It. Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, have you heard it?
What is it?
I know Liz has heard it. John's heard it. I've heard it. Suzanne's heard it. Anybody else? I'll start to give away awards for people who hear it.
It is good.
It is good, yeah. So imagine here you are, Jesus, and you're trying to teach complex issues to people who have totally messed up the Old Testament. And here's the just great beauty of Jesus in his teaching. Imagine him walking past a wheat field, and he just looks over and he says, the kingdom of heaven is like, and that's what we're going to look at today. So turn to Matthew chapter 13, and just imagine Jesus and his crowd are walking past this wheat field, and he just turns it into a teaching opportunity. Trying to unpack the Old Testament, give them the New Testament, and just save people. We'll start at verse 24. Jesus told them another parable. the kingdom of heaven is like. So he's talking the kingdom of heaven. We've got that. But notice he's not saying it is. He says it's like. So it's like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you're pulling up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." Now, we bought this house about a year ago. We've got 2 acres of land. There's a lot of yard. And so I brought out a resident Cumberland County expert on lawns. He was out at my house. He was picking up his aerator. And so Haas, who apparently is master of gardening, is there, and he's giving me advice. So much so I pull out my phone, which has the ability to take notes, and I'm taking down notes. I found out something about Haas White. He hates weeds. Did you know he hates weeds? And he chews on your dad a lot, apparently, about his inability to grow a nice lawn. But Terry just hates weeds. Now here's this parable when Jesus is talking about this gardener, this landowner, and what's he do with the weeds? Terry would say when he was with the police force, he'd come home every day and he'd just walk through his yard. And all he'd look for is those weeds, and that's what he'd do, is snatch it. See, I did listen. I listened, yeah? And I overseeded yesterday, by the way. So, well, I know. But anyway, so he just pulls them up. And Jesus is telling this parable, says, "No, leave them there." So this picture is he's walking past this field, and we're just imagining that he's walking past the field. It seems to be what he did a lot, was just use what was around him to teach. He's talking about weed. Next screen. Weed.
There's something wrong.
But yes, the alternate title for this passage or this parable is the parable of the tares. And some of you know them as tares, or some translations say darnel. This is, next screen, that's darnel ryegrass. And since we've got this new whippy computer program, let's go back to the wheat. Notice how similar they are.
It's not responding
Wheat,
right.
healthy, good for you. Next screen, darnel ryegrass. That, by the way, can even be somewhat poisonous.
Nice.
And so Jesus is painting this picture of God the gardener. And he'll explain it in a few minutes. We're going to get to the explanation. But he's painting this picture of leaving the poisonous weeds among the wheat. Now let's look, fast forward to verse 36. He explains the parable now. Then he left the crowd and went into his house, into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." So they didn't understand it. They had to have an explanation. He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one." Hey, God, we can get this picture. "And the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are the angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned up in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. then the righteous shall shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear. So let's talk Judgment Day. How many of you kind of look forward to Judgment Day? Especially when it's a back day. I mean, you know, like I'm thinking Justin last night at the emergency room. Yeah, there's sometimes, I'll use this story. I ordered a washer and dryer from Sears. And I find out Sears is no longer just Sears. Because here's the irony, it's an apartment-sized washer and dryer, it's for Mom's apartment. And so the dryer arrives in McMinnville. So I have to drive 48 miles to go get the dryer from McMinnville. I try and get them both delivered to the same store, Cumberland County. And I get on the phone and I talk to somebody at Sears and they say, no, you can't do that. Maybe if you went and talked to the